Camera's working now.
Well, yeah, can you guys hear us? Okay, that's because you had the camera off. So now we're good. Let me close this window. Okay.
Boy.
There you go.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Thanks for coming today. So today we're going to begin with Sarah Menchaca for Southern California Funding. Sarah.
Hey, Rich. Hey, everyone. Sorry, I'm just getting my voice back. I lost my voice last week. But I'm just here to give you guys a quick rate update for this week. We are ahead of the Fed meeting that's expected to meet tomorrow. They are expected to pause the rate hikes, so we shall see if that happens. But today, for a conventional loan, so this is anything up to 726,200 for Orange County. The rates today are between 6.75 to 6.99%, with 0 to 1 points being charged. A high balance loan, so anything up to 1,089,300. The rates are 6.999% to 7.625%, again with 0 to 1 points being charged. And a jumbo loan, anything above the 1,089,300, the rates are ranging between 7 to 7.375%.
Yeah, it's really high.
Yeah.
Well, are there 5 or 7 year adjustables that are any more competitive than what you talked about? Is that something that's available or not?
There are some. Really, to get the rate down, you want to, try to do maybe a buy down, where the seller or the agent can help buy down the rate.
Got it. All right, Sarah. Well, thank you. Someday maybe we're going to back down. Any questions for Sarah before we continue? Yeah, Sarah, thank you so much. I appreciate your help. So today's discussion, thank you once again. I just put the fine schedule on the screen because I just wanted to give you some idea about the implications if there are violations of the rules and regulations. And it's not just simply violation of the rules and regulations and the fines, but on your 4th violation, you'll be brought in front of the board of realtors. And then also, they can also report you to the Department of Real Estate. So that's the other thing that comes with things like that. Or even certain single individual violations could actually result in a report being sent to the Department of Real Estate. So we want to avoid fines for obvious reasons. And you can see just the impact of some of these things. So 7.9, for example, failure to submit a listing to the MLS upon marketing of a property. If you don't submit the property when you're required to in the MLS, the fine is going to range from $500 to $2,500. There's an asterisk there. And what does that mean? So if you're going to pay no less than $500, you won't pay more than $2,500, but the fine is actually equal to 1% of the value of the property.
So Rich, what does that mean when you don't submit a listing to the MLS when you're supposed to?
You have a listing contract and the beginning date is today to be marketed and placed in the MLS, and you don't do that, right? So if you list that property or if you submit it to the MLS on day 3, 4, or 5, you theoretically are subject to a violation. So I really want to go over the detail of today's discussion instead of focusing on the fines. And avoid those fines. So I've chosen certain aspects of the rules and regulations that I think are most prominent and want to be sure that you're fully familiar with that. So under section 7.1, listing subject to rules and policies of the MLS. So the policies are only applicable if you have a listing submitted to the MLS. If you don't, the question becomes, well, am I subject to the rules and regulations? So just keep that in mind, and we'll go over an example when you may not have something that's submitted to the MLS, but it's a rarity. And then property, section 7.2, property already listed by another broker. So the system only allows the system can allow you and another broker to submit a listing concurrently, and that can happen, but it's up to you to be sure that you're not doing that. You should get some kind of a warning flag. But then also there can be a disagreement between you and somebody else whether or not there is a valid listing contract. So that's something, if you do have issues. So let's assume it's a divorce case, and maybe one of the parties, usually what happens, husband and wife each want to choose their own realtor. So if I'm representing one of those two parties, I'm going to get that listing contract signed as soon as possible, and I'm going to put it in the MLS as soon as possible because I now control the MLS. So that would be my approach. You would have an obligation to disclose the fact that not all parties who are required to sign a purchase agreement have not signed the listing contract, but you can disclose that in the private remarks, as a matter of fact. So control the listing if something like that comes up, and that's why we
need one signature at least for that, right?
At least one signature, exactly. And that person, remember, you can only theoretically sell that person's pro rata interest in the property. If it's two individuals, you're only selling 50%. But the most important thing is to control that listing. That's my perspective, at least. And then section 7.3, there are times we have had co-broker arrangements. And if you are going to engage in an arrangement of that nature, if the other agent is not a member of the MLS, you're prohibited from entering that listing into the MLS.
And does that require broker approval?
It would require the approval of the broker from both sides, as a matter of fact, right? Let's see, and then section 7.5, it talks about, oh, I thought you had your hand up there for a moment. So I'm bringing up 7.5 because let's assume you take a listing contract and the seller tells you, I want to exclude 3 individuals from paying you a commission because my neighbor expressed interest in buying the property. So you agree to take the listing. If you take a listing of that nature and there are exceptions of which no commission is going to be paid, you need to disclose that in the private remarks on the MLS. And then also it talks about responsibility for classification of a listing. You can have a property that meets 2 different types of classifications. It could be a mixed-use property, for example, which is partially commercial and residential. So you can enter that listing in 2 separate aspects of the MLS, maybe under residential and under commercial. So you're entitled to do something like that. We just need to be sure that whatever we're doing or how we're classifying it is correct and it's defensible. And then some of the things you might see periodically, I don't want to spend much time on this, scope of service, limited service listings, and then 752 MLS entry only listings. They're very similar in nature. And what this is suggesting is that if you see those designations of entry only or limited service, the listing agent is not going to engage in any of the details of the transaction. So they're not going to be you're not going to submit a purchase offer to them. You're going to be dealing directly with the seller typically. And they still have the same obligation as a full service broker, but they're willing to take that risk apparently for charging a nominal fee for an entry only or limited service listing. And under 7.53, it talks about the fact that for that type of listing, the obligations of the broker are no different than our obligations in a full service transaction. And then 7.6, types of properties, responsibility for classification. We kind of touched upon this as a matter of fact. But out of those items under 7.6, items F, G, and H are not required in terms of the clear cooperation policy, meaning you don't have to put those properties on the MLS. So for mostly everything we do, which is residential in nature, you have an obligation to put it on the MLS with few exceptions. And then, let's see, of course, we know 770 compliance with California federal law. That goes without saying.
Rich, I have a question.
What's that?
Say, on the listing where it's MLS only,
Huh?
to the MLS, you said that there's similar
Entry only or
right.
limited service, right?
So, but you said there's still some liability behind that. What's the liability?
Whatever the liability a listing agent would have at any point in time, they have the same liability.
So in that case, let's say it's entry only, and the seller instructs you to just put their name in to contact them for showings and everything else, and then for agents to submit offers to them. Are you still liable for any offers that come in, or
Absolutely. Anything associated with that transaction as you would be with a full service agent. What about disclosures? So you may still have the same culpability to a seller as you would in a full service transaction. Just because you've opted to not take part in it doesn't relieve you of your obligation under the law.
So we still have to fill out an AVID.
Oh, that's the point, but you're not doing anything, right? Because somebody's just paying you $250 to put it on the MLS. But that's the risk that the listing agent is willing to take by not counseling the seller in terms of disclosures that should be obtained, so on and so forth. And just like we have an obligation to review disclosures, right? Those disclosures that our seller's completing before we disseminate those. If we're aware of an error, we should be notifying the seller that there's an error. Even the AVID, good point, Mike. You're not relieved of that obligation to complete the inspection. Mandatory delivery of listing agreements. So this is very important. I'll just read just this excerpt of it. Listing brokers shall input into the MLS any and all properties located in the MLS service area within 2 days of the effective date of any listing agreement on any exclusive right to sell, lease, or seller reserved listing agreement on 1 to 4 unit residential properties and vacant lots. And this is critical. The effective date of a listing agreement is the later of all necessary signatures of the sellers or have been obtained or at the beginning date of the listing as specified in the contract. So all necessary signatures are those needed to create an enforceable listing. So let's assume we have 2 sellers and that the contract date is actually going to be, what is the date today? The 18th? 19th, thank you. So we say the beginning date, line 3 of the listing contract is the 19th. However, they don't sign until the 21st. So what is the effective date of the listing contract?
21st.
The 21st, exactly. It's the date of it's the beginning date or the date of the last signature, whichever is later. So when we, in my example, we now have, let's assume that they signed it today and the effective date was today, so the 19th. And then we have 2 days in which to enter that listing into the MLS. What is the date that we put into the MLS? Just because we put it in the 21st has no relevance. It is the beginning date of the contract. That is the start date in the MLS.
So I notice there's a lot of confusion with that. When agents enter the listing into the MLS, they, like you said, they enter the beginning date as the date that they're entering into the MLS and not the contract date. Not the contract date, right? Whatever the effective date is the contract, that is going to be the start date that you would place in the MLS. So just because I entered it in the 21st, knowing the beginning date was the 19th, when you enter it into the MLS, you're going to enter it beginning as of the 19th, not the 21st. The 19th that they signed, right? Yes, because we said in our example that the beginning date and the date of the last signature was both the same date, which was the 19th. So just because I took 2 days to enter the listing into the MLS doesn't mean that the beginning date of the contract changed. So theoretically, if I entered it 2 days later, and assuming it's active, we already have 2 days of DOM, days on market, right? So Richard, for some reason, some emergency happens and you can't enter it 2 days later, would it be smart to get an addendum signed by the seller that says the beginning date to be whenever you're able to, whatever date you're able to enter to the MLS?
Well, you'd have to know that in advance.
Yes.
So if there's an emergency, here's one exception. If for some reason it's rare, because now we use electronic signatures for everything. So once the seller signs, it comes back to us. But if for some reason they signed today and they didn't deliver that signed contract for 5 days, then we have 2 more days following receipt of the contract to put it in the MLS.
And that would be the effective, the beginning date, right?
That would not the 2 days afterwards, but the date that they delivered it back to us. And then be prepared to have written documentation evidencing what took place, that there was a delay in the seller delivering that contract to you. But as I said, electronic signatures, it would be a rarity that would take place. But if you do meet with somebody personally and they sign and they didn't give you the listing contract, then later on sent it to you, you could be in that awkward position.
Yeah. So as an example, on most of my listings, I signed the paperwork and then I scheduled the photographers because I don't want to schedule anything until I have commitment from the seller. So usually it takes a week or less to get the photography scheduled. So is there a standard thing I should put in there? We'll go on the MLS 1 week from signatures.
Well, you would have two options. You could actually just date the beginning date out in the future. So
Oh.
you could do that, right? And they can sign it today, but you're not protected until the beginning date occurs. So if we have a contract signed today and the beginning date on the listing is October 1st, between now and October 1st, if that seller comes across another buyer, another agent that wants to list it for that period of time, you're not protected. So what I would suggest doing, make everything effective immediately, but then you're going to complete section 7 of the listing agreement, and you're going to register that listing. So you can actually take the listing, and you still have an obligation to register that listing within 2 days of the effective date of the listing. That never changes, as a matter of fact, whether it's registration or making it active in the MLS. So remember, if we take a listing and we want to exclude it from the MLS, we can do that. We just have to complete section 7 of the listing contract to have a start marketing date out in the future. Or you can actually complete a seller exclusion of listing from the multiple listing service, form SCLM, but it's easier to use a listing agreement. So if I want to take a listing and I know I'm not going to start marketing that property till October 1st, I'll take that listing today, make it effective today. I have to register that property within 2 days of the effective date of the listing. So today's the 19th, I'd have to register within 2 days, but the registration date is going to be the 19th. And between the 19th and the 1st of October, it will not be active on the market. For a registered listing, unlike coming soon or a whole listing, you can actually show the property, right, to somebody who has signed an agency disclosure with you. Any other form of marketing or any form of marketing whatsoever during the registration period causes you to put it on the MLS within 1 day as an active listing. That's required under the clear cooperation policy, which we are subject to. So if I have a registered listing, if I don't advertise it to the public, October 1st would be the start marketing date. So between now and October 1st, you're not going to have any days on market accruing. But remember to register that listing. Registration is 5 bits of information. It's no different than entering it as a listing. So in a sense, right, just small or just a few minutes of your time. And then once you're ready to convert that to an active listing, you go into registered and convert it to an active listing. Don't go into the MLS and start a new listing over again.
So let's say I take a listing, we're the 19th today, it's going to start on October 1st. Can I register it before it's supposed to go on?
You have to.
So that's what I mean. Is
Yes.
so that way I'm protected against another agent coming in.
Correct. You're absolutely protected because you have a contract.
But the contract would only start October 1st.
The days on market. The contract's going to start today.
Oh, so I do have to get it starting today.
You'd
in order
start
to
it
register
today.
it. Okay.
Exactly. So you'd have it starting today. So between now and the 1st, you're protected.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the only dilemma, if there's another agent involved, and we had this occur in one other case, right? One of your clients, Mike, that seller signed 2 listings.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So Mike you had registered, you had an SCLM, I believe, and someone else got a listing sign, or it was the other way around. Anyways,
But I put it in the MLS first.
you put it in the MLS
Yeah.
first. They had registered no, I don't know if they registered
think
it.
they did.
No, they and also they had the wrong name of the seller on there. Instead of the trust name, they had the individual's name.
Didn't check title.
No, they didn't check title. They didn't do their job, fortunately. But the problem is, if Mike took a listing today and he registers it, if someone else takes the listing and they register it, the system doesn't tell you there's a conflict.
Oh.
So it could, right? But whoever gets it first, theoretically, has a valid listing contract.
Ah, I see.
And then the other agent who took the listing secondarily probably has an ethics violation for putting the seller in the position of paying 2 commissions. So the system doesn't talk to anyone else who's registering, but you have an obligation under the clear cooperation policy to register that listing.
So there's a question from Ruth that says agents can put any date on the MLS. How does the MLS know the date is wrong?
Well, Ruth, they know that when another agent reports you, and then the MLS requests the documentation. So if they request a listing agreement, you have 1 day to supply that listing agreement to the MLS. And if you don't, the consequences are severe. They can even remove the listing from the MLS if they choose. That's how severe the consequences are, fines, so on and so forth. That's the only way they know, is once they request documentation. And there are 2,200 to 2,400 violations reported each and every month at Orange County Realtors. It's a lot. Yeah.
So in simple term, pretty much once we get a listing, we just have to register right away. But if you don't have the pictures yet, you can put the marketing on the later date.
If it's registered, you have no obligation to put any pictures in at that
Right,
time.
but we just need to, once we get a listing and that is signed, it needs to be in within 2 days. And then we can mark it later date. And then
Yes, you just need to fill out section 7 of the listing contract to say, I'm not going to start marketing it till that future date.
So it would still be inactive.
I guess you could call it that. It's not going to accrue days on market. It's
Well,
not
I'm
going to
just
be,
thinking when it comes to clicking the stuff on the MLS, so that's what, so it would.
there's nothing on the MLS you're going to see when you register the property. They're two separate systems.
Have to put the date, so that when they're gonna tell about that they, affect, market date.
Yeah, but the whole point with this is just we just have to register it within 2 days, so we get any violation or.
So if you take the listing today,
seller.
today's the effective date, right? And you're not going to market it until October 1st. Yes, you need to register it. But to also register it and to be in compliance, you need to complete section 7 of the listing contract to see, I'm not going to start marketing until that future
Okay,
date.
so that's the important part.
Yes,
Okay.
registering it also because it's a $1,500 fine if you don't register the property within 2 days of the effective date of the listing.
Just do it as soon as it's possible.
Okay, so that's the whole thing. Okay.
Yes. So registration's easy. If just before you log into the MLS or log into Matrix, the registration tab is shown on that screen, as a matter of fact. So you got 2 days to put it into the system. And we talked about registered listings. And remember, we are subject to the clear cooperation policy. It was pointed out to me that there's a box to check saying we are not subject to the clear cooperation policy. Well, that you can't, if you check the box, it's meaningless because you and your membership, you're subject, all of us are subject to the clear cooperation policy. So registered listings. You can't advertise a registered listing to the public. And what is the public deemed to be? It's anyone that hasn't signed an agency disclosure with your office during the preceding year. So if Mike has a client and that client had signed an agency disclosure, Mike can share that property with his clients. And actually during it being registered, Mike can also show that property. Coming soon, you can't allow any showings. Actually, when the property's on hold, also no showings are permitted. So it's a big difference. And there's some, I guess you're going to call it, gives you an opportunity to possibly market that property to somebody who is not deemed to be a member of the public. Also, if it's a registered listing, we can share that listing with everybody who's affiliated with the same broker's license. So we can do that. But if you have a registered listing, and let's say you take it today and you post something on Facebook today, but the beginning date was scheduled for October 1st. If you mark it on Facebook today, you have to put it on the MLS tomorrow.
So you do not advertise it's coming soon.
No. That's coming soon as an active status.
So if you accidentally done that, then you have to go to MLS and change the date.
You need to go into the MLS and actually enter the full listing then
Yeah.
to not
because
be in
you-
violation.
Because you have posted that in public.
Yes. Within 1 day of marketing the property, you need to change the status and put it on the MLS.
If you don't get caught.
Yeah, there's a lot of people searching. And there aren't that many listings out there. So what are they going to do? They're going to see the listing in some form of medium. And then they're going to look at the MLS and they're going to see that it is not on the MLS.
Yeah.
And they're going to send notification into the MLS. And then the MLS is going to ask for documentation, or they're going to wait a day to see if the following day you now created an active listing out of that registered property. Yes,
Ruth is asking if you can put up a sign.
that is marketing. No. Signage on the property. You put a sign up on the property and it's a registered status. Within 1 day, you need to change the status to active. Signs, flyers, whispering to people that haven't signed an agency disclosure. telling other agents, right? Unless they're all under the same broker's license. Yeah, it's very broad. Let's see. In certain circumstances, a seller may not want you to submit the listing to the MLS. You can do that. However, if you market the property the following day, you must put the property on the MLS. So they're signing a listing contract that's authorizing you to do that. And the question would be, what happens if the seller markets the property? Well, I would say that you're going to have culpability. So that's something you would discuss with your seller. You don't want any MLS. You don't want anyone to know, anyone in the public to know. I'm going to be in an awkward position if you market the property also. So the MLS, I don't know how you say, well, I told my seller to not market the property, right? I don't think that that's going to be acceptable, as a matter of fact.
If the seller does that.
Yes, yeah, if the seller, you have a listing contract and the seller never wants you to put it on the MLS and they market the property and you don't put it on the MLS, then yes.
What if you as a seller didn't know that they were doing that?
That's up to the listing agent to inform the seller.
It is better that you do it in writing.
You need to tell the seller, look, you cannot market that property to anybody other than the person who signed an agency disclosure with me. That's the only way you can protect yourself.
In
So
writing.
you have to make them sign that.
Before you present the property. But I think that's going to be a rare situation where a seller doesn't want it marketed in any way whatsoever. But it's just an extreme example of your obligation to put something on the MLS when you have a listing contract.
Just trying to do for hard-headed.
Yeah. And then section 711, if you do have a change in regards to the listing information, you have 2 days after authorization to make the change. Let's say there's a price change. And what must you get before you make any change in the MLS? Something in writing authorizing you to make that change, right? Otherwise, it's a $500 fine.
What's an example of that, Rich?
Well, I want to reduce the price from $1 million to $800,000. Send me a text message, give me something before I make a change.
So text message would be fine?
It would be. It would be. Written authorization. So a written authorization is very extensive in terms of what it can include.
Because usually that's just in the contract. But the text.
Well, it's if you have nothing else, I mean, it's better to have them sign something, no doubt, right? There's so many reasons why you want to get that, but just to avoid any fines. And not only that, but obviously you want the authorization from the seller because they're going to accuse you of doing something without their authority, and you have a fiduciary relationship. So written authorization is always critical. Let's see. And then a seller can withdraw a listing. Now, here's an interesting thing about withdrawn listings. If you've ever been engaged in or actually not engaged in a transaction, but you find a property, it's in withdrawn status, and we're going to see this later, and I'm jumping ahead. But the unilateral contractual offer of compensation, the commission offered to you, it's not valid when the property is in a withdrawn status. So if you're going to contact an agent who had a property and it's a withdrawn status, you want to make an offer, make sure that they sign a cooperating broker commission form to confirm the commission. And we'll see that later in terms of what the contractual offer of compensation is applicable to, and it does not include any property that is withdrawn. Yeah. And then also section 13, contingencies of a transaction. So let's assume you're listing a property and the seller is not going to move until they find a replacement property. Well, you should note that in the prior remarks. So any contingencies of the sale should be disclosed. All right, so now here it is, unilateral contractual offer, sub-agency optional. Sub-agency, we're not going to pay attention to that. Nobody uses it. It's just me as an agent. I'm appointing another agent to assist me. In a sense, that's what it is. I've never witnessed anybody using that, as a matter of fact. So this is the part I was just talking about in section A, in placing listing with the MLS into a status of coming soon, active under contract, or hold, the broker participant makes a blanket unilateral contractual offer of compensation to the MLS broker participants. It doesn't include withdrawn. So that's a big difference. So if you were to make an offer, once again, a withdrawn property, have a cooperating broker commission form signed beforehand to protect yourself. And then section 7B, or actually 715B, what's interesting, you have an obligation to offer compensation. It doesn't say how much, but you have an obligation to offer compensation on the MLS. And then section C, the amount of compensation offered through the MLS may not contain any provision that varies the amount of compensation offered based on conditions precedent or subsequent, or in any performance activity or event. So the best example I can give you is when someone offers $5,000 more in commission if you submit an offer by October 1st. So you cannot make that type of offer on the MLS. That's a violation also. You can't make an offer of compensation conditioned upon something taking place.
Chris, I have a question for, do we need to disclose 1031 exchange from the get-go?
No, I don't think there's any obligation for you to disclose that, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, if I'm representing a buyer, I'm less likely, at least initially, although it's difficult to always prove where you have the funds, if I tell them up front, the seller knows that you have to go through the transaction.
Yeah, but on the listing side, it's going to be a 1031.
Well, if I'm not going to make a contingent upon that 1031 exchange, if it will be contingent upon finding a replacement property as a seller, then you should have that in the private remarks.
I have a question.
So, yes. Hi, John.
Hey, so I see down here a lot in the agent remarks that the listing agent will offer a lower commission if they are the one that is required to open the door, as opposed to the buyer's agent showing up. Is that legal?
I would say no. That, once again, is a condition precedent, right? They can't premise your compensation on a performance of some event or non-performance of an event. So no, that would not be defensible in any way. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Masood?
So a similar, actually question I have in regards to agent basic on this group, not this group, sorry. Remarks, yes. So I had the situation that actually seller told me, like, I paid more to the other side if they close like within a certain date. And then they wanted me to have it in writing to just pay more commission on the other side if somebody brings the full price offer. What should I do in that case?
I tell them it's a violation. You can't do it. Okay. Or just saying, let's just increase the commission. So it's unfortunate, but I understand the incentives. That's why we don't see it that often, actually, because it is a violation. Yes.
So what if an agent calls you and you just verbally tell them, but it's not in the MLS? Like you verbally say, hey, if you can close before the first, there may be an extra commission for you.
Verbal arrangements or verbal commission arrangements between agents are enforceable. And then it's just, it's proving it
Okay.
after the fact. And then do they say, I never said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they honor it, right? Because you know the person.
So you have to have it in writing?
But the problem is,
Or
if
you
it's in writing, it's not enforceable and it's a violation. If I'm going to offer you $5,000 more.
You can't. So regardless, you just can't.
Yeah. If I tell you, hey, if you get your client to pay $2 million versus $1.9 million, I'm going to pay you an additional $10,000.
So technically, we cannot do
You
that.
can't do that, right? As a
It's
listing agent.
interesting because if you were to submit an offer, then I'm willing to take, 1% less if you accept my offer, then that's not a violation, right? But if
No, what you could do, you could just submit, if you're willing to accept less as the agent.
Yeah.
You can submit a CVC with your offer, right? And say, hey, this is a commission I'm willing to accept.
But that's not a violation, but getting more money is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or naming, but that's not a condition precedent. You're just taking it upon yourself to do that, to make it more attractive, as a matter of fact. Let's see.
Who would take us?
And then the other things, I guess we'll talk about with short sales, but you can't state that I'm going to offer you 3%, but then there's going to be fees deducted. If you're going to have some kind of fees deducted from the commission you're paying, you just need to calculate that before you actually put the amount offered on the MLS.
You have to just it.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, and then section 716. When are you actually entitled to the commission? Well, it's based upon the close, but the question comes up many often in regards to leases. What is the actual close? Now, if you look at a lease listing contract today, or actually a lease agreement also, the listing agreement, I believe, says until possession occurs, the listing agent's not entitled to commission on the lease listing. And then remember, the lease listing agreement itself also gives the property owner an opportunity to void the lease if, for example, that the tenant doesn't pay the upfront moving costs. So after giving notice, they can void the lease. So when are you actually entitled to the commission on a lease listing if you're representing the tenant? Well, I would say probably once that voidable period is expired and they're occupying the property. And likewise, if you were a listing agent, probably not until that time. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. We'll never use that argument when we want someone to pay us, but if we have to pay somebody else, we're going to use that argument. And it works. Let's see. And then a little too far. Commissions, also probate, bankruptcy listings. If you're submitting an offer for a probate, you're entitled to the commission that's offered on the MLS. If that sale is subject to an overbid process, if in the event the listing agent did insert an amount under the unconfirmed broker compensation or UBB, then if you're not the successful agent ultimately at the hearing, then you may be entitled to some form of compensation. So that is a form of conditioning compensation, or when it would be due, as a matter of fact. We're seeing a couple of short sales, not very many, but under section 718.2. And here's another exception to not conditioning or to conditioning compensation. If you have a short sale, you must specify that in the primary remarks, indicating that it's subject to lender approval. And sometimes banks cut back commissions. If you don't specify how that reduction is going to be split, then you're going to bear the entire burden of any reduction in commissions.
So in that example that you mentioned, how the reductions will be split by saying listing and buyer's agent will split the reduction, or
yeah, we'll share equally in any reduction in commissions demanded by the lender, something to that effect. Yes.
What do you think about this? Putting the commission purposely lower and stating that it may be higher depending on the lender. Like in other words, stating the reverse. Like instead of putting 2.5%, it might be less. Put in like 1.5%, but it will probably be more.
Well, I guess the question would be, what was your listing contract?
I see.
Go ahead, John.
Maybe it's me, but I find it interesting that that is not a violation when you list because of a short sale, that the commission might be different. But if you have to list a difference in commission based on the time of closing, that is a violation.
I'm not here to defend the policies. So,
Yeah.
just because you're logical, John. Yeah.
Logic has no place in real estate. I
It
understand.
has none, yeah. And then changes of offer of compensation. Well, the listing agent can actually modify the compensation that's offered on the MLS. But when can they do that? Well, if you have, before you submit an offer, they could change it on the MLS. If you contact, for example, the listing agent and you have a signed offer in your possession and you're talking with them about delivery of the offer, any changes after that would not apply to you, but you better protect yourself because if they change it on the MLS. So once again, They can't change it after you submit the offer. They're obligated to what's shown on the MLS.
But they can if you don't, they don't accept your offer, right? They can still change.
If they don't, I would say if you submit an offer, they don't accept it and you go back, then that's a good question. I think it might be defensible to say, hey, you still owe me the full amount. That may be a fight. And if there's reason to believe that they simply caused your offer to be rejected or didn't submit it to the seller, then obviously you're going to prevail on something like that. You just have to prove it. Let's see, and 720, broker participant or real estate subscriber as a principal. So if you have an interest in the property that you're selling and you're an agent, you must disclose that in the MLS and the private remarks. Okay. And then 721, it doesn't happen very often, but there may be times in a building you have multiple listings for leases and or properties for sale. You must list them individually on the MLS also. And then expiration, extension, renewal of listings. Well, obviously, if you have a listing contract, you must be sure that the expiration date on the MLS is the same as the expiration date on that listing contract. And then you can actually, once that transaction has expired, within 7 days after the expiration date, we can change the status, but you better have written instructions before the expiration date because you're going to be asked for written evidence that the seller agreed to extend it. And then days on market. Days on market are based on the MLS number, and cumulative days on market are based upon the APN number. Just as a matter of information for you. And once again, the MLS can at any time request documentation to evidence an extension associated with an existing listing. Let's go over that. 725, dual or variable rate commission arrangements. So if I have a listing agreement with my seller, and I'm willing to take 4% if I represent both buyer and seller, but yet the listing contract itself is for 5%. That is an example of a dual or variable rate commission, and it has to be disclosed as such on the MLS. Or if the seller brings the buyer and there's a different commission structure because the seller brought it, that is a dual or variable rate commission. So the problem with that is disclosure. You have an obligation when asked to disclose what that differential is because you're deemed to have an undue advantage over any other agent. So if it's 1%, as in my example, that's very beneficial. Then also, as the agent representing the buyer, you have an obligation to disclose that to your buyer. I find that very disadvantageous to an agent representing a buyer. But you have that obligation. And let's assume you do, or you're willing to take a variable rate commission agreement. Here's what I would do. I would take the listing contract. I would have a separate addendum signed stating, I only charge you 4% if I represent both buyer and seller. I'm not going to reference that addendum in the listing contract because if the MLS asks me for my listing contract, because someone files a violation believing I took a variable rate commission, I'm going to send them the listing contract and I'm not going to include the addendum. So that would be my approach.
It's good.
A little more work, but still well worth it. Huh?
If you have like two different commissions for each?
What, I'm sorry, what was that?
Is that an example if you have like two different, you're taking two different, it's two different commission for each, or one would be 1.101 and the other one would be 3? Is that like an example of that?
If that's all if you're representing both parties
Yeah.
and you're going to take 1 or 3.
No, I'm still taking 4, but one would pay, you know how like usually one would either pay either 1% and then the other either pay or the 3%.
I guess for me, the easiest way to explain it would be I'm going to take a 5% listing. And Mr. Seller, if I represent both buyer and seller, you're only going to pay 3% in total.
So
Put it on addendum, right?
So
Yeah, put that
that's-
on an
Yeah,
addendum, exactly. Show the listing as 5% on the first page, but
Yeah.
then on the addendum, explain
Yeah,
the
like-
reduction that the seller will
So
benefit
the
from.
seller would pay the 3%, and then the buyer will pay 4% on the addendum. Or
No, this has nothing to do with the buyer paying anything.
oh, okay.
This is just
Oh, it's all just
if the seller gets a reduction in the commissions.
Oh,
You present both sides, put it on the agenda.
And then 8.2, written documentation. So the MLS requires that for any status changes, excluding maybe going to active or active under contract or pending, that you must get written documentation. If I'm going to change that status to hold, I must have written documentation in my possession before I change the status to hold. Likewise, going back to active. What if I have a coming soon property and I have a 21-day time frame, but yet I want to make it active 10 days in? Get written documentation from the seller to change the status from coming soon to active. So changing it to hold, changing it to withdrawn, going back to active, you must get written documentation. Otherwise, unfortunately, it could be a $500 fine, and it could be a $500 fine for each and every occurrence. And then let's see, accuracy of information. So you're attesting when you put in information in the MLS that everything in there is accurate. Now, a lot of the times we're basing that on representations of the seller, because we really don't always know. A lot of things we do know. But so what I suggest to protect yourself and make sure the information is accurate, once that listing is completed, have the seller sign the MLS printout that they're attesting that this is their information. If you don't, it theoretically, not only is it a violation, but then it could be a civil code violation.
So on a hard copy, have them.
Yeah, have them print it out, put it in your file, right? Just print it out and have them sign it.
So have print the thing and then just have them sign. Can you sign?
Yeah, sign it, right. Yeah, let's do that. So remember, you can't show a property without the listing agent's authorization. Now, there are times that maybe you can't get in touch with the listing agent because you're trying to show the property. Well, if they don't respond within 24 hours, you theoretically can contact the seller directly.
Oh,
Wow.
how could you have sellers?
Hey, you know what we'll do what we have to. We'll contact the broker first, the listing agent, say, no one's responding. We've given them more than 24 hours. And if you don't get assistance from the listing agent, we're going to contact the seller directly. Knock on their door. But I would put everybody on notice first. It just puts me in a better position in the event there's a complaint filed. And then also, if for some reason the listing agent is really smart, they can actually put in the private remarks that under no circumstances, regardless of the time frame in which I respond, can you show the property or contact the seller directly. So that's the exception to the exception.
But there has to be something in writing from the seller, right? Instructing the agent, listing agent.
Well, I think it's presumed already that, I guess there's a couple of things. You know, when a buyer makes an offer, the buyer's agent has the right to participate in the presentation of the offer. Likewise, when a seller's issuing a counteroffer, the listing agent has the right to participate in the presentation of that counteroffer, unless either principal gives written instructions to preclude them from the presentation. It doesn't mean you can actually sit there and negotiate or be involved in the negotiations, but you actually have the inherent right to do that.
Have you ever witnessed that?
No. I think people sometimes they want to make sure they get the point across, but then whomever the other agent is, they're probably going to say that, and I would say most buyers and sellers don't want to have the other agent involved in a presentation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually done it before where we were in two different rooms and they wrote a counter. So I went into the other room, presented it, waited outside. The other agent gave me the counter. Then I went into the other room with the seller and said, what do you think? And then we signed it there. Yeah.
It's like a traditional mediation.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
That one's just saying to summarize it in simple terms. That whole thing.
The whole thing. All right. So the presentation of offers, for example,
Yes.
if you're submitting an offer,
Mhm.
you have the right to present or to assist in the presentation of that offer to the seller.
Oh, so that's just pretty much that.
Yeah. And likewise, if that seller issues a counteroffer, the listing agent has the right to participate in the presentation of that counteroffer to you and your buyer,
Got it. Okay.
unless your buyer says no, or the seller says no, I don't want Ann involved.
And then,
If they, Richard,
Yes.
if they don't respond, do we have to notify them that we're sending the contract, whatever it is, directly to the sellers? Or we don't have to?
I would do that just as a way for me to demonstrate that I made the effort to contact you. So you probably have some validation of making email correspondence or something, contacting a broker, and then after that, hey, you've given them an opportunity.
what happens if they don't respond?
That's the point. Then you can contact the seller directly with your
Like,
offer.
They just didn't respond, let's just, for example. We just,
If they don't respond, you can contact the seller directly.
oh, and then the seller would just tell me,
The seller would tell you what?
like, no, well, we should just, no. I'm just saying if you just didn't respond at all, even if you did.
Well, that's what
let's say
happens
someone
sometimes.
didn't Respond. as well.
Of the seller
Like, there's
themselves?
No response that, like.
Well,
you know,
you can actually, if you ask the listing agent in writing to provide written documentation that they presented the offer, that you're entitled to that, and they have to respond within 3 days. If you don't believe they presented the offer, for example,
Yeah,
whether or not the seller responded, if you don't believe they presented the offer, you can demand in writing that they give you written verification they did present that offer.
Okay.
And what you should do is the listing agent had the seller initial it, just for your own benefit. And then section 9.3, availability to show or inspect, or you cannot show properties on hold or coming soon. Fine is $1,500 or $2,500, some crazy number, as a matter of fact. You show a property that's in a coming soon status. Actually, for showing of a coming soon or hold listing, it's a minimum of 500, not to exceed 2,500, but it's based on 1% of the value of the property. So in Orange County, you're going to have a $2,500 fine. And that means you can't even show them to yourself. But remember, if it's registered and it's not a member of the public, you can show the property when the property is registered.
it has to be
As long as you activate it after you show it, when it's coming soon, then you're fine. Right?
Within 1 day. Yes, yeah. That would be the ideal
We're
situation.
talking about like people who are not.
Rich, in that situation, would you need something in writing from the seller to activate it after you've shown it and you know you have to?
You should. Absolutely.
Richard, when you say non-member, you're talking about the ones who are not in MLS.
Is there something that we talked about before, or?
Show, going back to like the open house, and even together, you have to until the close of date for the open house, that you said that, talk it out with the non-members.
Oh, I said, if you list a property
Yeah.
with somebody that is not a subscriber to the MLS, you can't put it in the MLS.
But you could talk to them about that, or you can tell them about it.
Yeah, you just can't put it in the MLS.
Oh,
But once again, if you take a listing and you start marketing that listing, because you're subject to the clear cooperation policy, you have an obligation to put it in the MLS.
Okay.
But you can't have another broker who's co-brokering the property with you, is not a member, a party to that listing agreement.
Or if somebody that submits an offer on your listing that's not part of the MLS, a member of the MLS, they're not entitled to that commission, right?
They're typically not entitled to the compensation that's offered, correct? Yes. Let's see. Statuses. So coming soon, remember, if you take a listing, the default listing in the lease listing, the listing agreement indicates that the seller is giving you authority to put it in coming soon. But you must also include a coming soon form. And on the coming soon form, remember, you can't put the property in coming soon for more than 21 days. So that form is going to document when it's to be going active. And if you take it active sooner, you need written authorization, keep that in mind. And then also when you're advertising a coming soon property, you have to give the date that it's coming soon. So it's coming soon, October 1st. That's the date. Coming soon, October 1st. Active, I think that's clear to everybody. Active under contract. There is a accepted contract, whether or not it's subject to contingencies or not. And the seller is soliciting other offers. Hold, valid listing exists. Remember, you cannot show property when it is on hold. If you place a property on hold, written authorization is required before you do that, and days on market will stop. Withdrawn, it's still a valid listing contract. So if you're trying to obtain a listing, and you look at the MLS and you see the property is in a withdrawn status, there's still a valid listing contract associated with that property. Now, what that doesn't prohibit, if you're offering other services other than selling the property, you can actually contact that seller. I'm here to offer property management services, or I'm here to offer to lease your property. That's not a violation. And then pending, days on market stop accruing, and the seller has accepted an offer and is no longer soliciting offers. Canceled, self-explanatory, same thing, expired, sold, and leased. And I'm going to get to some of these other things. Listing. And then if for some reason, remember, if it goes from pending, if you're under contract and it's pending and it goes back to, or it cancels, you have a time frame or limit of 2 days to change it from pending to active, as a matter of fact. Let's see, 11.5. So media on the MLS, it must actually represent the property. So if it's information associated with the community, you're supposed to caption those pictures, by the way. So keep that in mind.
In terms of like the pending contract, and then like we're in escrow, and escrow gets canceled, buyer cancels it. And I've seen the cases that actually agents, listing agents, putting it back to active, but it's still in the process of canceling the escrow. What is that something illegal?
Yeah, they should have that in the private remarks, subject to cancellation of escrow.
Okay, so that's not illegal.
But no, but realistically, they can't sell their property again until they give you evidence that they canceled that contract. Yeah. If you could go into a backup position, that certainly would be acceptable. And then prior authorization, remember, in regards to photos on the MLS, you have to have written authorization. Theoretically, if you hire a photographer, ideally you've got some kind of a contract that states it's your property or something to that effect, or you're licensed to use those pictures. The MLS could question that also. And then subsequent use of media, section D. Even though you paid to have those pictures, if you copy those same pictures from the MLS and there's a watermark on there previously, and now there's 2 watermarks, that's a violation. Use the source documents that you were given if you're going to be reusing any of that media to prevent any further fines. Branded media on your listing, you cannot have anything in any way whatsoever, pictures that associate you, your logo, tag names, things of that nature. Special agent done. You put that in the public remarks, that's probably a violation. Or catchphrases. What's your catchphrase, Mike?
It's a done deal.
It's a done deal.
But it's D-O-N-E.
I know it's probably a violation.
Really? It is?
Yeah,
Really?
that's a catchphrase.
Oh,
Yeah,
but it's not my name though. It's not.
I know.
Oh, boy.
It doesn't have to be your name.
Oh,
Or even the website with my contact information is not right. Okay, so for example, if I make the property address is like www and then the property address.com, and they can click that.
In the public remarks,
Yeah,
that's a violation.
even if I make that website
Yes,
for that
yes,
property
yes.
without any of my contact information.
That's a violation.
Sonny, when he goes to that website, it's got your information on it.
Yeah,
But
that's,
what about if I didn't put my information on it?
I would say it's a violation.
Or you even kind of create
Yeah.
your own website for that property.
No. External links or references, it says. That's an external link.
Oh, external link.
Oh, they don't want any outside link.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
They don't want you to have any undue advantage over another agent.
So just keep it clean.
Yeah, remember in the syndicated remarks, you can put anything you want, but we don't always see a lot of the syndicated remarks on other websites. That's the problem. It won't show up on Zillow, for example.
Are you talking about on the description, you put like a virtual tour?
Yeah, like any, like, I'm talking about you put your own website, right, for that property, right?
Yeah.
Even like the property address, the link address is not related to your name on it, and you still cannot do it because they don't want you to click anything from outside the link.
But your photographer, when they do a website link, they'll make it generic. So it'll go on under the description.
That's what but it's prohibiting any external links.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what it was.
In the
that's
public
what you
remarks.
said.
oh, in the public remarks. Oh, I
Yes.
got it. Sorry.
That's good.
Understood.
Was like, she created a link without the contact information, it's legal, and the answer is yes.
You
You
Okay.
you get deep.
So, but like, remark.
I misunderstood.
So you
Okay.
can't do that.
All right, and then section 11.5.1, you're required to submit at least one photo depicting a substantial portion of the exterior. And it says within 2 days of entry of the listing. So that would be at most 4 days following the beginning date of the listing. Because if the beginning date was 2 days ago, I enter it today, it appears as if I have 2 more days to at least add one picture representing substantially the exterior of the property. Okay. And then removal of historical records, 11.8. Once the listing is closed out, you can't remove anything, but you can before that listing is closed out. So that's very interesting to me. But if you have pictures that your seller or your buyer doesn't want on there, before that listing is closed, you can actually have them removed and it's not a violation. You must have at least one remaining picture on there representing a substantial portion of the exterior of the building.
That's the descriptions too, right, Richard? It's not just photos, because I'm starting to see that. too.
Yeah, I see that a lot, especially listing agents.
Right,
They don't want anybody else that's trying to compete with them from using that information.
right.
So you can't.
Welcome to
remove it.
AI.
No, you can,
You can remove it.
before. it closes.
Before,
it closes.
yes, before it closes. Rachel Schwartzstrom. Good example. An agent from Coldwell Banker Realty, where she removes all of her pictures and virtually all of her description on every listing before she closes it out.
She doesn't want the other.
She doesn't want you, who has interest in in representing a buyer in that area or a seller, to have any information on those properties that's sold.
So that's illegal?
It's not.
Oh, it's not. Oh.
I think it's troubling, and those have been discussions about that.
For comps,
Yeah, for an
right?
appraiser, it's very difficult. If you don't have those pictures and the information on that property.
But they usually call you, because they've done that with me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they'll call you and then you can, yeah.
But it theoretically could be a way that a listing agent could use that information to their advantage, that they have it to themselves.
Mhm.
And anyone else who is now interested in that area may not have all that information.
It's like a bad thing.
Depends if you're the listing agent or not. Yeah, I guess so. There have been ongoing discussions about that, and nobody's come up with a solution. So the rule stands as it is right now with the MLS. Let's see. Section 12.4, solicitation of listing filed with the MLS. So obviously you can't solicit a listing that's active on the MLS. And the other thing, I think it's farther back, or we'll touch upon it, but theoretically, you're not entitled to use the MLS as a source to find expired listings. So
Wow.
that's a violation.
Wow.
Can you give an example? Sorry.
So I am interested in the specific area, and I want to find all those sellers whose listings expired
Okay, and then,
or canceled. So I use the MLS to find that out. It's easy, right?
so you can't do that.
You're not right. Exactly.
No,
So-
Okay.
That's the way you-
no,
Oh,
You just don't tell them.
yeah, saw it on Zillow.
Because people tell, they don't realize it's a violation.
And so what happens is agents will send out a marketing piece for a letter that says, I noticed your listing canceled in the MLS or expired in the MLS. And I can tell you why it didn't sell. I can sell your property, but they spell it out. I noticed I found the MLS that you're listing.
Yeah, so why not just say, I work in your neighborhood and I noticed that the sign came down from your property and I'm wondering if you're still interested in selling.
Don't put that on an email, you need to talk.
Don't put it anywhere in the email, and certainly if you're in a hearing, don't tell anyone, right?
So that agent that sent that letter is in violation.
Hasn't caught it. If you want to do that, get away with it, you talk to that person, to the seller.
To the seller, yeah, just don't tell anyone.
Yeah. Well,
Don't tell anyone that you use the MLS as your source of the information. Anyone.
Sometimes nothing in writing, sometimes don't say anything.
Oh, we had that one, but I forgot this
But that's good. to
guy
know.
who was soliciting one of Jay's active listings. He was admitted to using the MLS to solicit expired in a hearing.
No.
What if you use Zillow? Zillow has a history on the property.
That's not the MLS.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah, you
So
good.
I could email and say, oh, I saw in Zillow, but maybe I saw it in MLS.
Yeah,
I mean,
You
don't have to
can.
say it.
yeah, I'd be hesitant to give my source. I see that your property is no longer listed. If they ask you, how'd you know? Well, I drive that area all the time. I know the area.
Just to put MLS on the email.
I had a sixth sense. Yeah, I never would have known.
Straight up in an email and they would have got caught and they were like, what? And I just tell you.
The good news is we're getting close to finishing here. So. Okay, advertising of listings filed with the MLS. Theoretically, we're not entitled to use the listings of a listing agent when marketing, right? We can use a market update report showing sold transactions, but there is an exception, and that's the neighborhood market report. So with the neighborhood market report, you can't publish it in a magazine or newspaper, but if you put together flyers, you can actually say these properties are listed. You can't use pictures, but you have to give credit to the listing agent. Now, the listing agent can opt out, and the only way you can tell if they've opted out is by looking at the agent one-line report. You have to add one of the fields in there to see if they opted out. Most people don't opt out. So that means they've given permission for you to use those active listings in a neighborhood market report. Now, you're required to give credit to the listing agent in office. And I don't know, and there is no specific format that's been designed. But possibly, if you were to do something like that, you know, my thought is on one side, I would show all these properties that are listed for sale. And then on the other side, I would give credit to the listing agent.
In small print.
No, it can't be any smaller than the information used to advertise the property. So it is a way to use actively listed properties. And then available listing content, it's specified here. Let's see. Status, price, commission, compensation, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, garages, so on and so forth. You cannot use pictures. So there's maybe something that might help. And then a lot of us send out market reports to show what is closed, and that's perfectly acceptable. But remember, you must use the disclosure that's in bold print right here, based upon information from the California Regional Multiple Listing Service. If you don't have that in there in at least 7-point fonts, then that is a violation also. So that's what I have for today. But just a couple of things. I just want to go over this quickly so we can see the impact. So 7.8, failure to input a listing in the MLS or register a property. Remember, it's 1% not to exceed $2,500. So probably in every single case, the fine is $2,500. Failure to submit a listing to the MLS upon marketing a property, another $2,500. That's 7.9. 7.9.1, marketing or no written permission on a non-cooperation listing. You can see the numbers there yourself. And then 8.1, failure to obtain seller authorization to list in the MLS, it's $1,500. And remember, if you don't have a signed listing contract, that's a civil code violation. And if they find you to be in violation, that MLS, that committee, the Professional Standards Committee, can choose to report you to the Department of Real Estate. So if you're in a hearing, there is a laundry list of items in terms of what the fines are, class requirements, so on and so forth. And one of them is, if that panel chooses, they can report that or require that to report to the Department of Real Estate. So we don't want to do that. And then 9.3, showing of a coming soon or hold listing, $2,500. And remember, if you're allowing somebody to see a property, you must accompany them. Otherwise, I think it's on here, another 1,500. Yes, there it is, 9.9. Failure to be present when providing access to a listed property.
Wait, what?
If you send somebody to a property or you leave them alone in the property to look around, that's a violation.
Like as a buyer or as a seller?
As an agent.
Or as an agent?
If you take a buyer to a property and say, I'm going to the store, I'll be back in 15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Somebody reports you. So can anyone
But
repeat?
what if-
What's
but
that?
what
Go
if-
ahead.
They wanted, oh, because the lock, they had to be. in
You
order
have to be present
Yeah,
when you're
okay.
showing a property.
Yeah.
That's what it's saying.
Or something.
But what if a seller was there and they just let them in?
And you didn't schedule it or you didn't take the buyer there?
Oh, but it's just more like schedule, but I didn't take them there. Like it's more of a.
You have to be
schedule.
present.
So even if I do schedule something, I have to be present?
If you do. When you let somebody in the property, you have to be present.
Oh, yeah, yeah, as a buyer, I'm thinking, I'm sorry. I
As
don't know
the
what-
buyer's agent.
Sorry, I haven't breakfast yet.
So anyone just want to recap for me the requirements in regards to filing a listing with the MLS and what the beginning or the effective dates of a listing contract are? And what you must do when you register a property?
Yes.
Okay.
So the date that it is signed is the effective date of the listing contract. And you would register it with the MLS within 2 days of that. And then what was the other part?
Well, remember the effective date is going to be the later of the beginning date or the date of the last signature.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And then so if it's a beginning, right, whatever the effective date is, you have 2 days to register it. If the start marketing date is out in the future.
And that's an automatic.
For me, that's normal because like I said, when I signed the agreement with them, I don't have photos or anything scheduled yet because I don't want to spend the money until I know
Yeah,
they're
it's
committed.
like,
So-
right. And then, yes, so registering that property is critical, when you have a start marketing date that's out in the future. So just remember, use section 7 of the listing agreement to specify the start marketing date.
And if they're unsure, they can reach out to us and
Absolutely.
clarification.
And any change in status requires obviously written authorization before you make a change in
So
status.
in addition to that, Mike, you just have it active without photos? Or you wait till you get your phones? Because you said you don't do your photography.
Yeah, I always wait till I get. the
So
photos.
that means it's still inactive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his best approach is to keep it registered until he
It's still
has
registered, but okay.
everything ready.
No, I just want to know how
Yeah.
it was doing.
Yeah, actually, some other things that we see sometimes if somebody takes a listing contract. Remember, if you put it in the MLS as active and immediately change the status to hold, days on market don't count also. So you could actually design a listing contract from the seller saying, yeah, actually, I want you to put it in the MLS, but then immediately put it on hold. That would be acceptable. But I think registering the property is the best approach if you've got photos to take and get the property in condition, renting it for sale. Coming soon, be sure you have that, if you're going to put in coming soon, be sure you have the coming soon form signed with the listing contract. And if you're going to change the date in the coming, from coming soon to active before the date that's shown on the coming soon form, get that authorization in writing.
Okay, so it has to be right.
Always. Yes. Any questions? Sunny?
Yes. I hope it's not a stupid question.
None of these are.
No.
Okay. Why do farming, right? So when I send out a postcard, but all my deals, they close already. No matter it's lease listing or it's listing, it's all closed. and maybe like leasing agreements for 6 months period of time already expired. Can I still use all those properties to advertising on my postcard and then send it out?
Yes, but you better change the status from available to sold.
But if I put it on sold,
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that if you change it, right?
I can still use it.
And remember, you can always advertise any properties you sold. You can advertise a property sold if you represented the buyer.
But I have to put sold.
Yeah, because
Address that.
if you don't say, if your original marketing piece said it was available for sale,
Oh, no.
and you've
No.
already leased the property, that, remember, your lease listing ends at the time the property's been leased.
Okay,
Or if you're
that-
selling a property, the
that makes
contract
sense.
is
But there's only
concomitant.
one thing. Okay, so for example, if I do marketing and I sold that property already, but for some reason the mailer went really late. But I say, oh, in escrow, but actually when the, you know, the people who live that area,
Mhm.
they receive my postcard is in escrow. But actually that deal I closed already. Because I cannot control how long they can receive it. So how
I
that
guess
works?
what
I understand. I understand the dilemma. You might have something that's scheduled to be mailed and it was available until, and actually the mail went out after the closing.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. I think it just has to be defensible that it went out before.
Say if it's
But
within
it's
1
something you
month.
cannot really control, it's not like, you like a
But
boat
then they have,
season,
I
like,
think the stamp, so you can just invite that.
Well, usually what we don't want to do, we don't want to throw away all the marketing material that we've generated. That's probably why you're doing that, right? Because you're still sending those out. I think it's a question, I think it's probably defensible. There is no, it's going to be difficult. What's going to happen? The only reason there's going to be a potential violation is someone's going to take that marketing piece and they're going to send it to CRMLS. And they're going to say, she's advertising this property as available.
I would like just say, oh, Sunny's, you know, like Sunny's deal, now it's like in escrow or sold or whatever.
Maybe you don't, but then again, do you want people to know it's been sold or you want them to know it's available? That's the dilemma. I think that's the message we're trying to get across. Sue?
Okay, so as a buyer's agent, in regards to negotiating commission with the listing agent, is that something legal to do?
Yeah, there's nothing that stops you from doing that, but remember, you can't negotiate commissions in the purchase contract. So I see that periodically, suddenly an addendum, there's a discussion or negotiation on commissions, so that's a violation also. So you would send a cooperating broker commission form for representing the buyer.
So you
Doesn't mean they have to sign it.
But nothing illegal about it. I can't just actually do that.
No.
So they can accept the contract without accepting your terms for commission.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So you don't have to be commissioned there yet?
No, I think the risk is two's being offered, say, but I want 3. Yeah, I submitted the offer and I submitted my cooperating broker commission form and I
Also,
want,
you have to have the commission.
yeah, you'd want that form signed beforehand because the other agent has no obligation to agree or consent to that.
Rich, I just want to make it really simple and clear. So whatever on the RNS, the status, it should be when you do marketing, it should be the same status when you do the older marketing. Is that right?
Do what now? I'm sorry.
Like, when you send out the postcard, right?
Uh-huh.
The status should be about that property should be the same as MRS. No, that time.
I think the dilemma, it's only active or sold. That's what I would be concerned about with my marketing material. It doesn't have to be pending. If you want to say it's pending, that's up to you. But once it's sold, you don't want to give the public the impression that it's available for
For
sale.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
already, okay, that's what
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be
So what
careful.
would be safe to do that then, like in your marketing? Like you need this,
Well, I think the question is, if you print up a lot of flyers and they
Yeah.
don't want to not use them, and
Yeah.
they show a property as being available, and then that same piece was mailed out at or around the time the property closed, the question is, am I still
Yeah.
going to be fined?
no, and
I could answer.
no, I understand that, but so if that was the case, and let's say you did print it out and it's sold already, but what would be like a mistake bet or beforehand before getting that out? Or would it just be better You have to write something on those houses, like it's either active or not active.
Well, I can say if you send something out and it shows it's available, you send it out after it's been closed escrow, that's certainly a violation.
I think you have a valid argument if you send it out within 30 days of it closing, but if you send it out 6 months after it closed, then you have no. You can't
Yeah,
say-
there's no valid explanation for that.
I have an experience.
Oh, you do?
Okay, good.
If you know, we already sold out the listing, and then we already sold out. We just mailed out. Then you know, most of people don't care, but some bad realtor care about it, right? And then they
Yeah.
just ask to the board.
Yes, MLS.
Then
right.
the board asked to me about that they send me pretty nice picture and then address and something like that. Then I just can prove date of send. If I send it, for example, I send all the information to the marketing company, right? Then the marketing company and if they say if I just send out the proof to marketing company, then they say if they before sold out, it's gonna be violation.
Mhm.
After then it's gonna be okay. So you can friendly with the marketing company. Okay, for example, I send the all the information and things like that so October 1st, and then sometimes they can send October 5th, but most of the marketing printing company they send out the 15th and then arrive about 20th. So I just approve the email. Hey, I send out all the
okay.
pictures.
Yeah, you can put Jared.
So then we sold out October 10th. We have no choice. It's just out of my
Okay.
hand.
Yeah,
It depends on how the print company, how fast they can do it.
yeah.
But it's
So-
not your fault because you're talking to them by
Yes.
email, there's a date.
So when I active the working folding at that time, it was active was sold or escrow, whatever something like that. So the things is that you can ask to printing company.
Yeah.
They can help
Oh, so you
avoid,
just.
avoid the violation.
That's smart.
Yeah. that's
Yeah, he
good.
got documentation from his printing company to help substantiate what he's claiming.
So I have a question. What if you put at the top of every mailer, this may or may not
Yeah.
still be available due to market conditions? Would that kind of cover, hey, it might be sold, it might be available, or?
Well, I haven't come across that language. So,
That's like, that's.
You know how like on the newspaper, it'll say at press time, at the printing of this document, this is the status that things may have changed.
Yeah.
So can you, yeah, that's.
I think it would suggest that it's available.
Hmm.
I think it's prompting them to call, giving them the impression that the property is available, whether
Yeah.
they're saying it may or may not be available. So that would be the dilemma.
The best thing to do is just to print out the amount of flyers you're gonna mail out. And then you don't have to worry about it. It's a sitting stack that you have to mail it out at a later time.
Yeah.
Only print out the
I
amount.
usually print out like 500 more just to have some at the house for people to pick up, and then the rest get mailed, so.
And then you use them, right,
yeah,
afterwards.
yeah.
Have them place a sticker on it saying sold maybe or something like
Yeah.
that. It's it's a lot of labor
Yeah.
to do something like that.
Okay, anyway,
So I think, Jay's suggestion is
I like that.
best. Yeah, you get documentation from the printing company. As long as you do it before, it's probably okay. Right? At least it's defensible, then they'll say, don't do it again, back it up or something like that.
Typically, with EDDM and bulk mail, they give you a 21-day period. They say they can go out anytime within 21 days. So after you submit the order to them, and then they print the job and then take it to the post office, there's still another up to 21 days. So I think a month is a pretty good grace period for something.
Some form of reasonableness, yeah.
Depends on the season though. During the
Yeah.
political season, I found this out, all the political ads that get mailed out, they get priority. Because, there's in November is when you vote.
Right.
So anything behind that gets pushed back.
So it could be
Jared-
delayed
Jared's-
even more.
My mailing house told me that.
Sure.
You have to
During the political season, yeah.
vote like done.
Yeah.
Vote Mike.
Uncle Sam costume, right?
Okay, any other questions? No, thanks for coming. Oh, I forgot to mention, Mike did talk to me before today's presentation. And he said, anybody that can prove to him today that they were present, because he feels as if you're no longer going to create any violations, he's going to supplement your E&O insurance for the next year.
Wow. I have no recollection of that. I do not recall.
It didn't go exactly that way, but.
I really think I'm glad.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, I've got to register. Register every time.
Contact Mike right now.
It's like, there's a two, even the seller signed a listing agreement with